Okay, so I want you to imagine you're standing in the doorway of a really bustling Parisian cafe.
Oh, I love this example.
Right. It's perfect. So
Mm.
you're there, waiters are rushing by with these trays of espresso. The air is thick with, the smell of roasted beans and cigarette smoke.
Glasses clinking everywhere.
Exactly. A dozen different conversations happening all around you at once. The room is just absolutely packed with physical reality. But as you stand in the doorway and sweep your eyes across the room, you don't actually process any of it.
You're completely blind to it.
Yeah, the tables, the people, the sounds, they all just blur into this meaningless gray background. And why? Because you are looking for your friend Pierre.
And Pierre is not there.
Pierre is not there. In that exact moment, your brain completely ignores the overwhelming physical universe right in front of you, just to focus on a single, intangible piece of nothingness. You are experiencing the reality of his absence.
Which is just wild when you stop and think about it. That phenomenon, the way human consciousness can basically elevate a literal void into a tangible, experienced reality, it's one of the most profound puzzles in human thought.
It really is.
Because it forces us to ask a question that sounds super simple on the surface, but is actually terrifyingly complex. Like, what does it actually mean for something to exist?
And that question right there is exactly why we are here today. So welcome to this audio overview. We are kicking off a massive, incredibly special project today.
A huge project.
Yeah, this deep dive is going to be the definitive starting point. It's the first in our 4-part foundational series of YouTube clips where we're exploring the core branches of philosophy.
And we have multiple deep dives planned for each part of this series, covering, the whole sweeping history of human thought.
We do. But before we can even get into all the historical timelines or the biographies of specific thinkers or, the ethics of how we should live our lives, we have to establish the absolute baseline.
We have to look at the tools.
Right, the core tools and the rules of reality itself. We are looking at the nature of existence. So ontology, being, and nothingness.
It is the ultimate ground floor discussion. Because the way we answer the question, what exists, entirely dictates the architecture of everything else that follows.
Oh, for sure.
It dictates how empirical science operates, how mathematical logic is structured, and honestly, just how you and I process our human experience every single day. The rules of existence are like this hidden operating system running beneath everything you see, touch, and think.
I'm absolutely fascinated by that idea. The hidden operating system.
Yeah.
But, if we want to actually unpack this, if we're going to audit the operating system of reality, we can't just start blindly throwing things into a bucket labeled real and another bucket labeled fake.
No, that would be a mess.
It would. If I say my car exists, we can all agree on that. That's easy. But if I say justice exists, or the number 7 exists, or a lack of enthusiasm exists.
Suddenly the bucket gets really messy.
Exactly. The bucket is overflowing with weird stuff. We need a methodology, right?
We absolutely do. Which brings us to the crucial distinction between ontology and meta-ontology.
Okay, let's break those down.
So ontology, which comes from the Greek word for being, is basically the study of what there is. It's the attempt to actually compile that master inventory of reality.
Right.
Meta-ontology, on the other hand, is the methodology. It asks, how do we even go about answering an ontological question in the first place? What are the strict criteria we have to use before we allow something to be placed on that inventory list?
Okay, so ontology is the final warehouse, and meta-ontology is like the clipboard-wielding inspector at the loading dock deciding what gets to the door.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah. And probably the most influential inspector at the loading dock in the 20th century was the philosopher W.V.O. Quine.
Quine?
Yeah. Quine looked at the entire history of philosophy and basically realized that humans are terrible at doing this intuitively. We are so easily tricked by our own language.
Give me an example.
Well, think about how we talk about a hole in the ground. Because the word hole is a noun in English, our brains unconsciously just assume a hole is a physical thing.
Wait, but I'm looking at a pothole in the street right now. I could physically trip over it. It's absolutely a thing.
Is it, though? Is it a material entity? Like, can you put a hole in a jar?
Well, no.
Can you weigh it? No. A hole is not a substance. It's literally an absence of substance. It's just a shape defined by the asphalt around it.
Oh, man.
But because our language uses a noun to describe it, we mistakenly grant it this ontological status as an independent entity. And Quine wanted to strip away all these linguistic illusions, so he introduced this concept called ontological commitment.
Ontological commitment, meaning Like, what are we legally committing ourselves to believing in?
Exactly that. Quine argued that we shouldn't just look around the room and point at things. Instead, we should look at our best, most successful scientific and logical theories.
It's making it rigorous.
Right. He said a theory is only ontologically committed to the existence of certain entities if those specific entities are absolutely required for the theory to actually function and be true.
Let me test that just to make sure I'm getting it.
Yeah.
If we have a really successful theory of biology that explains how cells divide,
Right. Yeah.
and that theory mathematically requires the existence of DNA to make any sense whatsoever, then we are oncologically committed to the existence of DNA. We have to let DNA into the warehouse.
Correct. DNA passes the inspector. But Quine knew that even scientific theories are usually written in sloppy everyday language, so he took it a step further. He famously declared, and this is a great quote, "To be is to be the value of a variable."
To be is to be the value of a variable. That sounds very math heavy.
It is. He said to find out what a theory actually commits to, you cannot read it in plain English. You have to translate the theory into the rigid mathematical notation of first-order predicate logic.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through what first-order predicate logic looks like in practice. Because turning English into math just sounds like a great way to confuse everyone, including me.
I know, it sounds intimidating, but it's actually entirely about removing confusion. So, in ordinary language, we use proper names and descriptions all the time. I might say something simple, like, Socrates is wise.
Seems perfectly clear.
It seems simple. But Quine says names are fundamentally deceptive. Think about it. What if I say Pegasus is a winged horse?
Okay.
By using the name Pegasus as the subject of the sentence, I seem to be implying that Pegasus already exists in some realm, just so I can attach the property of winged horse to him.
Oh, I see the trap. If I say Pegasus does not exist, I'm caught in a paradox. I'm literally bringing him into existence just by naming him, purely so I can kill him off in the second half of the sentence.
Exactly. That specific problem is known in philosophy as Plato's beard. It's the idea that non-being must in some weird sense be in order for us to even talk about it.
Plato's beard, I love that.
Yeah. And Quine shaves Plato's beard using first-order logic. He basically gets rid of names entirely. He replaces them with bound variables.
Like in algebra.
Just like algebra, letters like X or Y, you strip the sentence down to its quantifiers. So instead of saying Socrates is wise, you translate it to, get ready for this. There exists an entity X, such that X uniquely has the properties of Socrates, and X is wise.
Wow. Okay, so there exists an entity X. I am forcing the theory to explicitly declare upfront that a physical thing is occupying space.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, try to translate the Pegasus sentence using that strict mathematical structure. You can't just say Pegasus does not exist.
Let me try. I'd have to say something like, it is not the case that there exists an entity X, so that X has the properties of a winged horse named Pegasus.
Boom! You nailed it.
Oh, wow. That completely sidesteps the trap. By putting, it is not the case that there exists an entity X at the very front of the mathematical formula, I never accidentally bring Pegasus into the warehouse. I slam the door before he even forms as a concept.
And this strips away the entire illusion. When you regiment your language this way, you realize you don't need to believe in some mystical realm of fictional horses or holes in the ground or a lack of enthusiasm.
You only commit to the hard, bound variables that survive that brutal translation.
Right.
Okay, I totally understand the logical purity of this. It's very clean. But I have to ask, who actually cares?
What do you mean?
I mean, is anyone outside of a university logic department doing this? It feels like we're doing incredibly complex intellectual gymnastics just to prove that a pothole isn't a solid object.
Yeah.
How does this actually impact the real world?
It impacts the real world profoundly because this exact philosophical framework, this weird logic we just did, literally gave birth to modern computer science.
Wait, really?
Yes! You rely on it every single time you use the internet.
You're telling me Quine's logic of bound variables is running the internet?
In a very real sense, yes. Think about information science. If you want to make a machine, like an artificial intelligence, a search engine, or a massive global supply chain database, if you want to make it understand reality, you cannot rely on human intuition. A computer does not intuitively know that a pothole isn't a physical object. A computer only knows the symbols you feed it.
Right, it's just code.
So to make machines understand the world, computer scientists have to create a formal digital ontology.
So they're literally building the warehouse of reality out of code.
They are. Think about a massive international database tracking inventory for some huge tech company. Human programmers in California might write code using the term smartphone.
Okay, simple enough.
But then, maybe 5 years later, programmers in India update the system, and they use the term smartphone to include tablets with cellular
Oh,
chips.
I see where this is going.
And then 10 years later, an AI might categorize a smartwatch as a smartphone because it makes calls. This is a known issue called concept drift. The meaning of the symbol slowly morphs over time.
And if the database is using three entirely different definitions of a core object, the whole supply chain logic breaks down.
Exactly. The system crashes because it doesn't know what actually exists on the warehouse shelves anymore.
It has no idea what X is.
Precisely. So to prevent that, software engineers build formal ontologies. They write rigorous logical dictionaries that define categories of existence using the exact kind of strict parameters Quine advocated.
So they have to declare it mathematically.
They do. They say, there exists a class of entity X such that X has a screen size between 4 and 7 inches, and X has a cellular radio. If a device doesn't meet those mathematical criteria, it does not exist as a smartphone in that universe.
That is just the staggering connection. So the exact same rigorous rule book that stops a philosopher from believing in ghosts is what stops a supply chain algorithm from confusing an iPad with an iPhone.
It forces us to define our terms.
It really does. And, for you listening right now, consider how your own daily assumptions, your personal implicit ontology shapes your life. Just think about the concepts you treat as real, solid entities. Well, say you are angry because you feel a lack of fairness in your workplace. You are ontologically committed to fairness. You are acting as if fairness is this invisible substance that should be flowing through the office air conditioning.
That's a great point.
But if you apply Quine's logic, fairness isn't an entity X. It's not a substance. It's a complex set of relational behaviors between humans.
Well,
When we change how we categorize existence, we fundamentally change how we react to the world.
and that is the practical power of meta-ontology. Once you know your rules for what is real, the world just looks entirely different.
Okay, so we have our meta-ontology. We know how to audit the inventory. Now we actually have to, walk down the aisles of the warehouse and look at what passed the test. How do we organize the things that are permitted to exist?
To map the categories of reality, we really have to look at the titan of Western ontology, which is Aristotle.
Aristotle, of course.
Yeah. Aristotle was an ontological realist. He believed that the categories we use to organize the world aren't just like mental filing cabinets in our heads. He believed those categories are actually out there, physically baked into the universe itself.
So he thought reality came pre-sorted.
Yes. He didn't just throw everything into one massive bucket labeled being. He developed a highly structured system, and the absolute bedrock of his system is the clear distinction between primary substance and accidents.
Okay, you need to define primary substance for me. Because when I hear the word substance, my brain immediately thinks of a chemical goo.
Sure. For Aristotle, a primary substance is a specific individual concrete thing. It is the core anchor of reality. So it's not the abstract idea of a horse. It is that specific breathing horse standing right there in the field.
Okay,
It's not the broad concept of geology. It is that specific rock you are holding in your hand. Primary substances are independent. They do not need to be attached to anything else in order to exist. They just are.
okay, that makes total sense. The physical, individual objects are the anchors. But what are accidents? Because in modern English, an accident is a car crash or, spilling your coffee. Why is Aristotle categorizing reality into substances and mistakes?
Right. That's just a weird translation issue. In the philosophical translation from Greek, accident doesn't mean mistake at all. It means an incidental property or a quality.
The quality.
Yeah, an accident is something that happens to belong to a substance, but it absolutely cannot exist on its own. It requires a host.
Give me an example of an accident looking for a host.
Take the color white. The concept of white cannot just float around independently in the vacuum of space. You will never just bump into pure white walking down the street.
Right.
White must be present in a substance. It has to be a white horse or a white rock or a white piece of paper. Aristotle cataloged 9 specific categories of these accidents, things like quantity, quality, relation, place, time, posture, state, action, and passion.
Okay, hold on. I need to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
I totally get why white is just a quality attached to a horse. That's obvious. But you just listed time and place as accidents. Are you seriously telling me Aristotle didn't believe space and time were fundamental parts of the universe? Time feels like a law of physics, not just a sticker you put on a horse.
You are hitting on a massive debate in the history of physics right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. From our modern post-Einstein perspective, we think of space-time as a fundamental fabric. But for Aristotle, space and time were purely relational. They were accidents of substance.
How so?
Think about it from his perspective. If there were absolutely no physical objects in the universe, no stars, no planets, no atoms at all, would place still exist?
I mean,
For him, place is just the boundary containing a physical body. Without the body, there's literally no place.
and I guess without objects moving and changing, there is no measurement of time.
Exactly. For Aristotle, if you say something like, Socrates is standing in the marketplace yesterday, Socrates is the single primary substance. Standing is his posture, marketplace is his place, and yesterday is his time. Those are all dependent accidents. If Socrates vanishes, his posture vanishes right along with him. Socrates is the heavy gravity of existence, and the accidents just orbit around him.
Okay, when we put it like that, it's a very cohesive, intuitive way to look at the world. It really just feels like common sense. The solid stuff is real, the descriptions of the stuff are secondary. How long did this view dominate?
Oh, Aristotelian realism dominated Western thought for almost 2,000 years. It was unquestionable. But eventually, there was a massive paradigm shift. We moved from realism to conceptualism.
And conceptualism.
And this shift was heavily, heavily driven by Immanuel Kant in the 18th century.
Okay, I know Kant is notoriously difficult to read, so let's try to distill his core flip of the Aristotelian model for the audience.
Let's do it. So Kant argued that we can never truly know the universe as it exists completely independently of us. He called the raw, unfiltered reality out there the thing in itself.
The thing in itself.
And we have no direct access to it because everything we experience has to pass through the hardware of human cognition first.
Oh, it's like a biological filter.
Exactly.
Like if we think about how our eyes work, right? The universe is flooded with an infinite spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. Wi-Fi signals, ultraviolet light, microwaves.
All out there.
But human eyes only possess the hardware to decode a tiny, tiny narrow band of visible light. So we look around a room and think, oh, this is what the room looks like. But we are actually totally blind to 99% of the reality in that room. Our biology filters the data.
That is a perfect analogy. Now take that biological filter idea and apply it to logic and concepts. Kant argued that concepts like substance, quantity, or cause and effect are not actually out there in the thing in itself.
Where are they?
They're the built-in operating system of the human mind. He says the mind acts like a cookie cutter. The universe provides the raw, formless dough, and our cognitive hardware stamps it into distinct, understandable shapes so we can process it.
Wow. So when Aristotle thought he was meticulously mapping the objective structure of the universe, Kant says he was actually just mapping the inside of his own brain. Aristotle was looking at the cookie cutter, not the dough.
Yes, exactly. And this conceptualist approach gave rise to a fascinating modern field called natural language ontology.
Natural language ontology.
Yeah. This field proposes that the grammar of our everyday language actually reveals the hidden shape of those mental cookie cutters.
Okay, how so?
Well, we unconsciously reveal what we think exists by how we naturally construct our sentences.
Oh, I love when philosophy hides in plain sight like this. Walk me through how natural language ontology actually works in practice.
It looks for hidden boundaries in our speech. Let's look at how our minds unconsciously separate a physical object from a temporal event. I want you to try saying this sentence out loud for me. The new library existed last year.
The new library existed last year. That sounds perfectly normal.
Now try this one. The new library took place last year.
No, that sounds totally broken. You would never say a building took place. A building is a solid thing. You say a concert took place, or, marathon took place, events take place, objects exist.
Exactly. And let's reverse it just to prove it. You can naturally say, the marathon took place last week, but it sounds completely absurd to say, the marathon existed last week.
Yeah, that sounds super weird.
Right. Without anyone ever explicitly teaching us metaphysics in school, our natural grammar strictly enforces two completely different ontological buckets. Objects get to exist, events merely take place, we grant them entirely different conditions of reality in our brains.
It's incredible to think our grammar is secretly doing heavy metaphysics every time we order coffee or talk about our weekend.
It really is.
But, even if Kant is right, and we all share these mental categories to organize physical objects, when you really push hard on the concept of physical matter, it seems to completely break down. Our mental categories hit a wall.
They definitely do.
Let's explore the paradox of material constitution. Specifically, the famous problem of the statue of David and the lump of clay.
Ah, yes. This is one of the absolute greatest puzzles for anyone who firmly believes that solid physical matter is the bedrock of reality.
Okay, here is the setup for you listening at home. Imagine a sculptor has a lump of clay. We are going to name this specific lump of clay lump.
Very creative name.
I know, I try. So on Monday, lump is just sitting on a wooden table. On Tuesday, the sculptor gets to work and molds the clay into a beautiful, detailed statue. Let's call the statue David.
Okay, got it. Monday is lump, Tuesday is David.
Now, David is made entirely, 100%, out of lump. They occupy the exact same physical coordinates in space, they weigh the exact same amount, they share every single microscopic atom. So the seemingly obvious question is, are David and lump the exact same entity?
Right, and to our everyday common sense, of course they are. It's just clay. But if we apply strict logical properties to them, we run into massive contradictions. We have to look at their temporal properties first, their timeline in history.
Right, because lump, the raw clay, existed on Monday. But David, the statue, did not exist on Monday. He only came into existence on Tuesday. So they have completely different ages.
Exactly. And how can a single object be two different ages at the exact same time?
You can't.
It cannot. The law of identity clearly states that if A is identical to B, whatever is true of A must be true of B. If lump existed on Monday and David did not, they cannot logically be identical.
That's a headache.
And the problem gets even worse when we look at their modal properties.
Modal properties meaning what?
Meaning what could potentially happen to them in the future. What happens if you take a sledgehammer and smash the statue into a cube?
Okay, if I smash David into a cube, David is destroyed. The statue ceases to exist, it's gone.
But what about lump? Is the lump of clay destroyed by the sledgehammer?
Well, no. The clay is completely fine. It just changed shape. It's still a lump of clay.
So, lump can survive being violently squashed into a cube. David cannot survive being squashed. Because they have entirely different conditions for survival, they are demonstrably not the same object.
Wait. I have to push back here. Why do philosophers insist they are two different objects? Why can't we just say that David is a temporary phase that the clay is going through, like water turning into ice? It's the same substance, just a different shape.
Because if you say David is just a temporary phase of the clay, you are fundamentally demoting the statue to an Aristotelian accident.
Oh.
You are saying the statue isn't a real thing, it's just a posture of the clay. But art historians, insurance companies, and our own natural language treat the statue as a primary substance. If someone breaks into a museum and steals the statue, they didn't just steal the clay's posture.
He stole an entity.
He stole an entity. So if David and lump are both distinct entities, but they are made of the exact same atoms,
then the inescapable conclusion is that two entirely distinct physical objects are occupying the exact same physical space at the exact same time, which violates everything we know about physics.
Exactly. The paradox of material constitution reveals how incredibly messy the concept of solid matter really is. We think we know what a physical object is, but the moment we rigorously scrutinize its identity, the physical world just starts melting in our hands.
And this feels like the perfect pivot point in our investigation today. Because if categorizing the external objects out there is this full of paradoxes and illusions, maybe we are just looking in the wrong direction.
What do you mean?
What if we stop trying to define the lump of clay and start looking at the entity doing the categorizing? What about human consciousness itself?
Ah, yes. This is the massive shift brought about by the phenomenological and existential traditions in the 19th and 20th centuries.
Right.
Instead of trying to mathematically define a rock from an objective outside perspective, thinkers in these traditions focus intensely on the human variable. They ask, how does human consciousness actually experience being from the inside out?
And the undisputed titan of this approach is Martin Heidegger. He basically grabbed the entire 2,000-year history of ontology, told everyone they were doing it completely wrong, and flipped the board over.
He really did. Heidegger opened his masterwork, Being and Time, by arguing that philosophy had suffered a massive collective amnesia.
Amnesia.
Yeah. He said we had completely forgot the true question of being. For millennia, from Aristotle to the natural language scientists, everyone was obsessed with asking what things are. Is it a substance? Is it an atom? Is it clay?
Right. Auditing the inventory.
Exactly. But Heidegger said that is a secondary question. The primary question is what it means for things to be. And meaning does not exist in a vacuum. Meaning requires a mind.
So he shifted the focus.
Yes, he centered his entire philosophy on the specific type of entity that asks these philosophical questions. Human existence. And he called us Dasein.
Dasein. It's a German word, right? And it translates roughly to being there or being in the world. But what is the profound difference between Dasein and just, being a regular human?
The difference is entirely how we relate to reality. Heidegger vehemently rejected the old Cartesian model of the universe.
That's Descartes, right?
Right. René Descartes gave us a very dualistic view. He said there is the thinking thing, which is the mind trapped inside the skull, and the extended thing, which is the objective physical world outside.
Okay.
In the Cartesian model, we are basically like astronauts locked inside the spacesuits of our bodies, just staring out through the visor at an alien universe of geometric objects.
We are isolated observers trying to logically deduce the world.
Yes. And Heidegger says that is entirely false to our actual lived experience. Dasein means we are holistically embedded in our environment from the very start. We are defined by our practical relationships, our tasks, and our social contexts. We don't encounter the world as a list of objective dictionary definitions. We encounter the world through action and meaning.
I want to use Heidegger's most famous analogy here because it just perfectly crystallizes how things possess different kinds of being depending on our practical engagement with them. The analogy of the workshop and the hammer.
Oh, it's brilliant. Paint the picture for us.
Okay, so imagine you are a carpenter in a workshop.
Yes.
You are building a cabinet, you grab a hammer, and you are driving in nails, one after the other. Bang, bang, bang. It's rhythm.
You're in the zone.
Exactly. While you are working, you are not actually looking at the hammer.
Yeah.
You are not calculating the specific gravity of the steel head or admiring the cellular structure of the wooden handle.
No, of course not.
In fact, if you are truly skilled, the hammer practically disappears from your conscious awareness. It becomes a fluid, transparent extension of your arm. Your entire focus is projected forward onto the cabinet. Heidegger called this state of being availableness, or readiness to hand.
That is crucial. In its most primordial fundamental state, the world does not reveal itself to us as a collection of scientific objects. It reveals itself as a network of useful equipment.
Right.
A door is for opening, a chair is for sitting, a hammer is for striking. Its being is entirely defined by its utility to our projects.
But then suddenly the hammer breaks. The steel head snaps off the handle and clatters to the floor. The moment it breaks, the entire nature of reality shifts.
The spell is broken.
The fluid rhythm stops. Suddenly you stare at the pieces in your hand. You are intensely, painfully aware of the heavy, useless lunk of wood and metal. It is no longer a transparent extension of your arm. It is an obstacle. It is a foreign object intruding on your consciousness. Heidegger called this secondary state occurrentness, or presence at hand.
And here is Heidegger's brilliant critique of the entire history of science and ontology. Traditional philosophers, the Aristotelians, the quantum physicists, they almost exclusively deal with occurrentness.
Because they're analyzing things.
Right. They put reality under a microscope, they detach it from human meaning, and they treat the universe as if it is just a giant collection of broken hammers that we are staring at objectively.
Wow.
Heidegger argued that this objective scientific gaze is actually a limited, derived, and secondary way of looking at reality. Our primary reality is the fluid, meaningful, practical engagement of Dasein. We only analyze the world when it stops working for us.
That is such a deep observation about human nature. It's so true. We only notice our bodies when we are sick. We only notice the Wi-Fi router when the internet goes down.
Disruption forces us into the scientific gaze.
Disruption forces us into the scientific gaze. I love that. But, Heidegger wasn't the only one dissecting the human experience of being. Jean-Paul Sartre took this phenomenological approach and pushed it into a much darker, much more radical direction.
He really did. Sartre built upon Heidegger, but he introduced a stark, totally unbridgeable division in reality. He divided existence into two mutually exclusive categories, being in itself and being for itself.
Let's clearly define those two categories so we don't get lost.
Sure. Being in itself refers to the entire non-conscious physical universe. It is solid, self-identical, passive, and inert. A rock is simply a rock. A table is a table.
Okay.
It has no hidden depths, no potential to be anything else, no hopes, no fears. It simply is. Sartre described it as massively suffocatingly solid.
Okay, so that's the inert physical world.
Yeah.
And being for itself.
Being for itself is human consciousness, and human consciousness is the exact opposite of inert matter. It is fluid, dynamic, and never identical to itself from one moment to the next.
Right.
But what makes it truly unique, and this is really the cornerstone of Sartre's philosophy, is that consciousness operates fundamentally through the power of negation, through nothingness.
And this is exactly where we return to the cafe scene we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive. Let's really analyze the mechanics of what happens when you look for Pierre in that cafe, because it proves how human consciousness actively generates reality out of absence.
Let's dissect the mechanics of that perception, yeah.
So when you walk into the cafe, the room is overflowing with being in itself. Solid tables, physical waiters, the smell of coffee. But you don't perceive the room as a collection of atoms.
No.
Your consciousness immediately goes to work organizing the room based on your specific desire. Finding Pierre. You scan the faces. Not Pierre, not Pierre, not Pierre. The entire physical reality of the cafe is instantly demoted. It just becomes the background.
And what becomes the foreground? The absence of Pierre.
Yes. His non-existence in that space becomes the most tangible, dominant feature of your reality.
And Sartre argues this is not just a secondary intellectual thought. You're not just standing there doing a logical equation in your head, like, if Pierre is here, I will see him. I do not see him, therefore he is not here.
Right, it's not math.
No, you are having a direct, pre-reflective, visceral encounter with an absence. Pierre's absence literally haunts the cafe. It shapes your emotional state. It dictates your physical movements as you search the room. It is a real phenomenon.
But I keep coming back to Quine's inspector at the loading dock. You can't put Pierre's absence on a scale and weigh it. A security camera recording the cafe doesn't record an absence. It just records people drinking coffee.
And that is exactly Sartre's profound point. The absence does not exist in the physical world of the being in itself. The absence is injected into the world entirely by you.
By me.
By your human expectations, your desires, and your consciousness. If you had never met Pierre in your life, you would walk into the exact same cafe and perceive a lively room full of people. Human consciousness acts as a force of annihilation. We define reality by what it is not.
See, this is where I start to struggle with the concept a little bit. Are we saying humans are basically a walking void? Like, we don't have a solid core, we are just a bubble of nothingness moving through a solid world.
It's a trippy thought.
I read a quote in the sources from the philosopher Ortega y Gasset, describing the human being as an ontological centaur, half immersed in nature, half transcending it. Is that what Sartre means? That we are half meat, half void?
That is actually a very apt description. Because we are being for itself, because our core is nothingness, it means we are not wholly determined by our physical nature. Sartre called our physical historical reality our facticity.
Facticity, yeah.
Our height, our genetics, the country we were born in, that is our facticity. A rock is trapped being a rock. But a human being is never just one thing, because our consciousness always has the capacity to step back, reflect on our facticity, and negate it.
Meaning we can say no to what we are.
Precisely. You can say, I am a waiter, but I don't have to be a waiter tomorrow. You can say, I'm afraid, but I will act as if I am brave. Because our consciousness is rooted in nothingness, it means we have no fixed, predetermined essence. We are not a finished product.
Wow.
And this nothingness is the absolute root of Sartre's concept of radical existential freedom.
This is his famous phrase, right? Existence precedes essence. First, we exist as this empty consciousness, and then we have to invent our own essence through our choices.
Yes.
Which he says means we're condemned to be free. Because we are empty at our core, we have no excuses. We can't blame human nature or biology or God. We are forced to constantly choose who we're going to become. It is a terrifying level of responsibility.
It is the ultimate rejection of deterministic ontology. Humans drag nothingness into the solid world, and that nothingness is the clearing where freedom is possible.
But, okay, if human consciousness is a void, and the universe is a solid block of matter, how do they actually interact? It feels like Western philosophy gets stuck in this aggressive binary. You either have solid substances, or you have an anxious void.
It's very black and white.
Is there any system that tries to merge them? Because Sartre showed us that nothingness isn't just an empty black hole, it's an active, generative force. And that realization seems to perfectly bridge the gap into the ancient traditions of Eastern philosophy.
It definitely does. But before we jump fully to the East, it is crucial to note that Western logic did eventually realize this binary was a problem. G.W.F. Hegel tackled this exact paradox in the 19th century.
Oh, Hegel.
Hegel pointed out that if you try to conceive of pure being, like the most fundamental, bare-bones determination of reality, completely stripped of any specific characteristics, accidents, or traits, your mind just hits a wall.
Because if it had absolutely no traits,
Yeah.
what is it? It's just a blank.
Right. Pure being, completely devoid of all determinacy, is so utterly empty that it becomes logically indistinguishable from nothing. Our minds cannot tell the difference between pure everything and pure nothing.
That's a paradox.
They seem like absolute opposites, but when pushed to their logical extremes, they collapse into each other. For Hegel, the mind cannot rest in this paralysis. The only way out is a synthesis. The synthesis of being and nothing is becoming.
Becoming, meaning movement,
Yep.
transition.
Yes. When something becomes, it is in a dynamic, active transition, constantly moving between nothingness and being. It is a process.
So Western philosophy eventually realizes, through agonizing logical steps, that being and nothingness are locked in this dynamic dance. But Eastern philosophy has explicitly taught this for millennia.
They were way ahead of the curve.
Yeah. In the East, we find a really rich tradition of what is sometimes called me-ontology, the study of non-being, or the active study of nothingness.
And to understand Eastern ontology, we really must dive into the Buddhist theory of the two truths. This framework originated in India and fundamentally claims that to avoid suffering and delusion, reality must be understood on two distinct levels simultaneously:
Okay, what are they?
conventional truth and ultimate truth.
Conventional truth being how things appear to us in everyday life to help us function, and ultimate truth being how things actually are when you strip away all the illusions.
Precisely.
Let's trace how different Buddhist schools interpret these two truths, because it is a fascinating historical evolution, and each school gets increasingly radical. Let's start with the Sautrantika school.
The Sautrantika school is intellectually very accessible to a modern mind because it actually shares a lot of similarities with modern physics and Western empiricism.
Okay.
For them, the ultimate truth consists exclusively of what they call unique particulars, or point instants. They argue that reality is not made of solid, enduring objects. Reality is a rapid, ever-changing, unimaginably fast flux of momentary, indivisible flashes of matter and consciousness.
Point instance. Are they like frames in a movie reel?
That is an excellent metaphor. Think about it. When you watch a movie, you see a continuous car chase. But if you examine the physical film reel, there is no continuous car chase. There are thousands of static, individual photographs flashing by at 24 frames per second.
The motion is an illusion created by the speed.
The Sautrantika school argues that reality works the exact same way. The universe is flashing in and out of existence moment by moment.
Wait, so when I look at the wooden table in front of me, I perceive a solid object that has been here for years. But the ultimate truth is that I am seeing a million tiny flashes of reality popping in and out of existence.
Correct. The table itself is just a conventional truth. It is a mental construct. Your mind connects the dots of these rapid point instants, synthesizes them, and slaps a universal label on them, table, so you can put your coffee down without your brain short-circuiting.
Wow.
Ultimate reality is the dynamic, flashing flux. Conventional reality is the static, linguistic concepts we impose over the flux.
That is already a huge leap from Aristotle's solid primary substances, but the Buddhist progression doesn't stop there. The Yogacara school comes along and says the Sautrantika school didn't go far enough.
Yogacara is a school of radical mind-only idealism. They reject the idea that there are physical point instants out there in the external world at all. They argue that the external physical world does not exist, period.
If the physical world doesn't exist, why does the table feel hard when I knock on it? Why do we all see the exact same sun in the sky?
Yogacara scholars use the analogy of the dream to explain this. When you are asleep and dreaming, you can touch a wall and it feels solid. You can eat an apple and it tastes sweet. The environment feels entirely external and real to you.
Sure.
But when you wake up, you realize the entire sensory experience was generated completely from within your own mind. Yogacara argues that waking life is functionally identical. The external world is a conventional truth, an intricate, persistent illusion born from what they call karmic seeds stored in a foundational consciousness.
So we are all just projecting a shared dream. How do we synchronize the dream so we can talk to each other?
They argue that our karmic seeds are deeply entangled, leading to a collective projection. But the crucial takeaway for our deep dive into existence is this. For Yogacara, the only ultimate truth is the mind itself.
Just the mind.
And not your individual ego-driven mind, but a pure, non-dual awareness that exists before the false division of subject, observing, and object.
So reality is entirely mental.
Hmm.
But then the historical progression takes its most famous and I think its most explosive step. A philosopher named Nagarjuna arrives and establishes the Madhyamaka school, and he drops the biggest ontological bomb of all.
Nagarjuna is widely considered one of the most profound thinkers in human history. He systematically dismantled both previous schools. He rejected the physical point instance of the Sautrantika, and he rejected the mind-only foundation of the Yogacara. He introduced the concept of sunyava, which translates to emptiness.
Emptiness.
And Nagarjuna's radical claim is that absolutely everything is empty.
Wait, I need you to clarify this immediately. If he says everything is empty, doesn't that just mean nothing exists? That just sounds like sheer nihilism. Why get out of bed in the morning if nothing exists?
It is the most common misunderstanding of his work. Emptiness is absolutely not nihilism. Nagarjuna is not saying that the table, the tree, or you do not exist. He is saying that things are empty of intrinsic reality or independent self-existence. His entire philosophy is built on the mechanism of dependent origination.
Dependent origination, meaning everything originates depending on something else. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Let's examine a tree. In Aristotle's view, a tree is a primary substance. It stands alone. Nagarjuna would ask you to look closer. Where does the tree actually begin and end? The tree cannot exist without the soil.
Right.
It depends entirely on the rain, the sunlight, the carbon dioxide in the air, the seed it sprang from centuries ago, the insects that pollinate it. If you conceptually remove the soil, the water, the sun, and the air, where is the tree that is left over?
It vanishes. There is no core tree hiding inside the bark.
Exactly. The tree has no independent intrinsic essence. It is not a noun. It is a temporary relational nexus of causes and conditions. And Nagarjuna ruthlessly applies this logic to everything in the universe. Atoms are dependent on subatomic forces. Thoughts are dependent on prior memories and external stimuli.
Even consciousness.
Consciousness itself is dependent on the objects it observes. The entire cosmos is a vast, infinitely complex, interdependent web. Because every single node in the web relies on the other nodes to exist, no single thing stands alone. Therefore, all things are empty of independent self-nature.
That reframing completely changes the emotional tone of the word emptiness. Emptiness isn't a dark, lonely void. Emptiness is the very fact of our profound interconnectedness.
Yes.
Because I am empty of a rigid, isolated Cartesian self. I am porous. I am capable of interacting with the air, the people around me, the entire universe. Emptiness isn't the absence of reality. It's the absolute fullness of relations.
That is a beautiful synthesis. And this precise realization was seized upon by the Japanese thinkers of the Kyoto school in the 20th century, specifically Kitaro Nishida and Keiji Nishitani.
Ah, the Kyoto school.
They were uniquely positioned because they were deeply trained in Western philosophy. They read Kant, Hegel, and Heidegger, but they were culturally rooted in Zen Buddhism. They sought to bridge Western phenomenology with Eastern emptiness.
How did they bridge that gap?
They contrasted the entire Western tradition of ontotheology with the Eastern tradition of absolute nothingness. Ontotheology is the Western habit of always seeking the highest being to anchor reality.
Like,
Exactly. We search for Aristotle's unmoved mover, or the Christian concept of God as the supreme entity, or even the physicists search for the ultimate God particle. The West always wants a foundational thing.
and the East doesn't want a thing.
The Kyoto school argued that true reality cannot be grounded in anything, no matter how supreme. They posited absolute nothingness, or zetaimu. But again, it is not a destructive void. It is the boundless, unnameable field, or what Nishida called basho, meaning place. It is the generative matrix that allows all beings to exist and interact in the first place.
I think the best analogy to reframe this for a Western listener is a canvas. Stop picturing nothingness as a terrifying black abyss in space that threatens to suck you in. Picture absolute nothingness as a pristine, blank canvas, or an open, sunlit field.
That's a great way to picture it.
It is the generative, open place that provides the room for all distinct things to exist, to move, and to relate to one another. You cannot paint a complex masterpiece if your canvas is already cluttered and covered in dark paint. The pure emptiness of the canvas is exactly what makes the creation of the painting possible. It is, as the Kyoto school calls it, a groundless ground.
That is a masterful analogy. Absolute nothingness is the clearing that lets beings come into presence. It is the ultimate source of all affirmation, creativity, and freedom. The canvas doesn't dictate what the painting will be. It simply allows it to be.
So we have traveled from Quine's mathematical logic auditing a warehouse to Aristotle's solid substances, to Kant's biological filters, through the anxieties of human existentialism, and deep into the profoundly interconnected emptiness of Eastern mysticism. It is an incredible journey of human thought.
It spans the globe.
But here is where this story takes its most surprising and, frankly, its most validating turn. What happens when we look at this exact question through the lens of modern empirical science? We step out of the monastery, we step away from the philosophers, and we walk into a quantum physics laboratory. And we find that the physicists are suddenly arguing about the exact same thing.
This brings us to the fascinating intersection of quantum field theory and metaphysics, specifically regarding the nature of the quantum vacuum. In contemporary cosmology, there is a fierce, highly publicized debate about the origins of the universe. One of the most vocal figures in this debate is the theoretical physicist Lawrence Krauss, who authored a famous book titled A Universe from Nothing.
Krauss's basic argument is that modern physics proves we don't need philosophy, and we certainly don't need theology, to explain why there is something rather than nothing. He claims that physics has empirically shown that the universe spontaneously emerged from nothing, specifically from the quantum vacuum. He argues that the laws of quantum mechanics alone are self-sufficient to account for the Big Bang and the creation of all cosmic structures. It's a very aggressive dismissal of philosophy.
It is a bold, controversial claim, and it has drawn intense, blistering criticism from philosophers of science. The philosophical counterargument centers entirely on Krauss's definition of the word nothing. In the sources we analyzed, there is a compelling critique that draws on classical Islamic philosophy, specifically the 17th century thinker Mullah Sadra and his principle of the fundamentality of existence, or the FOE.
Let's unpack the FOE. What is the fundamentality of existence, and how does it dismantle Krauss's argument?
Mullah Sadra argued that existence is a singular, continuous, and graded reality. There are varying intensities of existence, from the absolute highest, most robust source down to the weakest, most contingent, barely there phenomena. His critical insight is about the nature of laws and structures. He argued that scientific laws, physical properties, and mathematical formulas are not self-sufficient things. They do not have independent existence. They are merely abstract descriptions of how actual beings behave and interact.
Because a law doesn't do anything on its own. The law of gravity doesn't pull planets together. Planets pull planets together, and the law of gravity is just the math we use to describe it.
Exactly. Laws cannot cause a universe to spring into existence because a law is a conceptual framework. It requires an underlying existential real, actual stuff to operate upon.
So how does Mullah Sadra's FOE apply directly to Lawrence Krauss and his universe from nothing?
The philosophers argue that Krauss is playing a massive linguistic trick. When Krauss talks about nothing, he explicitly admits in his own work that he is talking about empty space, the quantum vacuum. But his version of the quantum vacuum contains the laws of physics, it contains gravity, it contains space-time, and it contains zero-point energy.
That's a lot of stuff.
Right. From the perspective of rigorous philosophy, a space filled with fluctuating energy, governed by complex mathematical laws, and capable of generating virtual particles is absolutely, unequivocally not nothing.
He just renamed a very quiet, highly structured something and put the label nothing on the jar. True philosophical nothingness is absolute non-existence. It has no properties, no mathematical laws, no dimensions, and no potential to do anything. Therefore, Krauss hasn't explained how something comes from nothing. He has just explained how a very complex universe evolved from a very simple, weak state of existence.
That is the crux of the critique. Physics cannot explain the absolute origin of existence because physics must assume the existence of physical laws to even begin its calculations.
Okay, so Krauss is losing the philosophical debate on the definition of the word nothing. But putting the semantic argument aside, the actual physics of this quiet something, the quantum vacuum, are unbelievable. It completely destroys our everyday common sense understanding of what empty space is. Let's talk about the empirical proof of the quantum vacuum.
In classical Newtonian physics, a vacuum is very simple. It is a region of space devoid of all matter and all radiation. If you take a box, pump out every single atom of gas, and shield it from all light and heat, the inside of the box is truly empty. It is dead space.
Makes sense.
But in the 20th century, quantum field theory revealed that this is entirely wrong.
Because reality is made of fields, not just particles.
Yes. Quantum fields permeate all of reality. There is an electron field, a quark field, a photon field. Even when you drop the temperature of that box to absolute zero and you successfully remove every single real particle, the underlying quantum fields do not shut off.
They're still there.
They possess an irreducible quantum restlessness. This is known as zero-point energy. The vacuum is the lowest possible energy state of the universe, but that minimum energy state is not zero. It is a seething, dynamic, bubbling cauldron.
Bubbling with what? If we took all the particles out, what is bubbling?
Virtual particles. Pairs of particles and antiparticles are constantly popping into existence out of the vacuum energy, existing for an unimaginably tiny fraction of a second, and then annihilating each other back into the vacuum. The empty space in the room you are sitting in right now is boiling with this invisible quantum activity.
I am going to play the skeptic here for a second. This sounds like pure mathematical fantasy. It sounds like physicists just balancing equations on a chalkboard. How can we possibly know that invisible particles are popping into existence in an empty box for a billionth of a second? Has this actually been proven in a lab?
It absolutely has been proven, and it is one of the most elegant experiments in modern physics. It is called the Casimir effect.
Casimir effect.
In 1948, a Dutch physicist named Hendrik Casimir realized that if the quantum vacuum is real and it is bubbling with virtual energy waves, it should exert a measurable physical force. The experiment he proposed is conceptually simple, though engineering it is incredibly difficult.
Set up the experiment for me.
Whoa.
Let me guess what happens.
You take two perfectly conducting, uncharged metallic plates. You place them in a perfect vacuum chamber. You bring them incredibly close together, parallel to each other. We were talking nanometers apart. So close they are almost touching, but not quite. They have no electrical charge, they have no magnetic charge.
Okay. If I'm using my classical everyday logic, the space between them is empty and they have no magnetic attraction, so absolutely nothing should happen. They should just sit there, suspended in the vacuum, forever.
That is what Newton would say. But according to quantum physics, the vacuum both outside the plates and inside the tiny gap between the plates is filled with fluctuating waves of zero-point energy. Think of these energy waves like ocean waves of all different sizes.
Okay, I'm picturing waves.
Outside the plates, in the open vacuum, waves of every possible wavelength are crashing around. But inside the tiny gap between the plates, the space is restricted. Only energy waves with a very small wavelength can physically fit between the gap. The larger waves are excluded.
Oh, I see the geometry of this. So there is literally less wave activity happening inside the gap than there is happening in the wide open space outside the plates.
Exactly, which creates a pressure differential. There are more quantum fluctuations pushing on the outside faces of the plates than there are pushing on the inside faces. The result: the empty space outside the plates physically crushes the plates together.
Empty space pushes metal around.
Yes. This force was successfully measured in 1997. The graph of the Casimir force is empirical, undeniable proof that empty space is not a dead void. It exerts physical pressure.
That is staggering. The realization that nothingness can push metal plates together feels like the ultimate synthesis of our entire deep dive today. We started this audio overview looking for the foundational rules of reality. And what we found across thousands of years and across totally different disciplines is a remarkable convergence.
It is a grand synthesis. Whether you are looking at Nagarjuna's interdependent emptiness, or the Kyoto School's absolute nothingness functioning as the generative blank canvas, or Jean-Paul Sartre's human consciousness defining itself by what it lacks and negates, or quantum field theory showing that empty space is a boiling cauldron of zero-point energy, they are all pointing to the exact same underlying truth.
Nothing is not a dead, passive, terrifying black hole. Nothing is an active, dynamic, relational, and generative tapestry. It is the matrix out of which all somethings emerge. The baseline rule of reality is that being and nothingness are not enemies. They are dance partners. You cannot have the solid, tangible reality of the physical universe without the dynamic, restless, interconnected potential of the emptiness that holds it.
That is the foundation. And if we bring this all the way back to you, the listener, we have to ask the ultimate meta question. Why does any of this matter? Why spend an hour thinking about this?
Right, why should they care?
To be truly well-informed isn't just about memorizing historical trivia or knowing the latest facts of the news cycle. It is about understanding the hidden architecture of reality itself. When you look around your room right now, you are no longer just seeing a collection of inert, isolated objects.
You are seeing a web. You now know that the physical objects, the seemingly empty space between them, the linguistic grammar you use to name them, and the very consciousness you are using to observe them are all participating in this massive fundamental dance. Your reality is shaped by your language, fueled by the invisible energy of the quantum vacuum, and made meaningful by your own terrifying freedom to choose. It changes how you see the world. You are literally built out of the universe's most profound mysteries.
It provides a sense of profound connection and responsibility.
It really does. And to wrap up this foundational entry in our series of YouTube clips today, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own. It builds on the science we just learned, but takes it inward. We've learned that in physics, the absolute lowest energy state is not dead. It is a humming web of infinite potential and zero-point energy. So, what is the absolute lowest energy state of human consciousness? When you meditate or when you sit in silence and manage to clear away all the thoughts, all the anxieties, all the distractions, and all the things from your mind, are you truly empty? Or are you finally tapping into the absolute generative zero-point energy of your own existence? Take that thought with you today.